Welcome back to our channel on this beautiful, suspense-filled day as we dive deep into the latest mysteries gripping our favorite town. We have an incredibly thrilling scenario to unpack today, one that will leave you questioning every shadow and every ringing phone. Let us explore the chilling new developments that are about to turn everything upside down. The psychological landscape of Genoa City is about to be fractured by a storyline that plunges us into the darkest, most terrifying corners of the human mind, specifically focusing on the lingering, inescapable trauma endured by Chelsea. Exactly 1 year ago, Chelsea was subjected to a horrific ordeal, a brutal kidnapping orchestrated by the sadistic and enigmatic Allison. The anniversary of such a profound trauma is never simply a date on a calendar. It is a visceral, suffocating reminder of terror, a time when the mind involuntarily regresses to its most vulnerable state. For Chelsea, this anniversary was already poised to be a period of immense emotional fragility, a time requiring careful navigation and the unwavering support of her loved ones. However, the universe has a cruel sense of irony, and instead of finding peace and healing on this dark milestone, Chelsea is being thrust back into a waking nightmare that promises to be even more insidious than her original captivity. The terror has returned, not with a violent abduction, but with a silent, creeping dread that invades the sanctity of her own home. The manifestation of this renewed terror is as simple as it is paralyzing: the ringing of a telephone. In the modern age, a phone call is a mundane occurrence, but for Chelsea, it has become a harbinger of absolute doom. Mysterious calls from an unknown, untraceable number have begun to plague her residence, shattering the quiet safety she has fought so hard to rebuild over the past 12 months. When the phone is answered, there are no threats screamed into the receiver, no demands made, and no ransom negotiated. Instead, there is only a chilling, heavy silence, punctuated by the rhythmic, deliberate sound of breathing on the other end of the line. It is a psychological tactic designed to inflict maximum paranoia, a way of communicating that she is being watched, hunted, and entirely at the mercy of an unseen predator. The abrupt hang-ups leave a lingering echo of dread in the air, a toxic residue that poisons Chelsea's sense of security and forces her to constantly look over her shoulder. In this suffocating atmosphere of fear, Catherine "Cat" Richardson has stepped up to become Chelsea's ultimate emotional anchor and protective shield. Cat, recognizing the profound psychological toll these calls are taking on her friend, has taken it upon herself to intercept the terror, often being the one to answer the phone and face the sinister, heavy breathing on the other end. Cat attempts to project an aura of unshakable strength, trying to rationalize the calls as a cruel, coincidental prank by a sick individual exploiting the anniversary of Chelsea's highly publicized kidnapping. However, the sheer persistence and the calculated timing of the harassment are beginning to erode even Cat's formidable composure. The psychological burden of acting as a human shield against an invisible psychological assault is immense, and Cat is slowly realizing that they are not dealing with a random prankster, but with a highly coordinated, malicious campaign designed to break Chelsea's mind. The situation escalates from a terrifying personal ordeal to a full-blown investigative crisis with the involvement of Smitty, a relentless journalist and investigator known for chasing the darkest, most dangerous truths hidden beneath the surface of the city. Smitty's initial inquiries into the situation were meant to provide clarity, to trace the untraceable, and put a face to the phantom caller. However, his relentless digging over the weekend unearthed a revelation so chilling that it inadvertently amplified the terror for both Chelsea and Cat. Smitty's findings shattered the comforting illusion that this was merely a random act of cruelty. His investigation strongly suggests that the threat is not only real, but deeply embedded in the very nightmare Chelsea thought she had escaped. The bombshell Smitty drops forces the women to confront a reality far more terrifying than a ghost from the past: the realization that the past is not dead, and the monster is still pulling the strings. The most shocking and compelling twist in this unfolding narrative is the sudden surge in intensity regarding the true identity of the tormentor. The immediate, instinctual fear was that Allison had somehow escaped her confinement, slipping through the cracks of the justice and psychiatric systems to personally resume her reign of terror. However, Smitty's meticulous investigation leads to a devastating dead end on that front. Allison is confirmed to be securely locked away, heavily guarded, and entirely incapable of making these untraceable, localized phone calls herself. But rather than providing relief, this fact births a far more sinister theory. If Allison is behind bars, yet the precise, intimately timed psychological torture continues, there is only one logical, terrifying conclusion. Allison has an accomplice on the outside. She is operating through a proxy, a dedicated operative, executing her malicious will from beyond the prison walls. This revelation transforms the storyline into a brilliant, high-stakes psychological thriller. Who is this inside helper operating on the outside? The profile of such an accomplice presents a myriad of intriguing and terrifying possibilities that encourage endless audience prediction. Is it a deeply devoted blood relative of Allison, someone bound to her by a twisted sense of familial loyalty and a shared capacity for cruelty? Or, perhaps more chillingly, is it a former member of the mysterious, shadowy organization that Allison was once a part of? If Allison was merely a high-ranking operative in a larger, cult-like syndicate, this accomplice could be a fanatic follower, a sleeper agent activated specifically to ensure that Allison's victims never truly find peace. The idea that Allison's dark network extends far beyond her own physical reach introduces a level of systemic danger that leaves Chelsea with nowhere to hide. Yet, there is another, deeply tragic angle to consider regarding this mysterious accomplice. What if the person terrorizing Chelsea is not a willing participant, but a victim themselves? Allison is a master manipulator, a woman who excels at identifying and exploiting the deepest vulnerabilities of the human psyche. It is entirely plausible that this outside helper is being ruthlessly blackmailed or psychologically manipulated into doing Allison's bidding. Perhaps Allison holds a dark secret over their head, or perhaps she has threatened the life of someone they love, forcing them to become the instrument of Chelsea's torture against their own will. This dynamic would add an incredible layer of complexity to the narrative, creating a scenario where the stalker is simultaneously a predator and a hostage, trapped in Allison's web of control just as surely as Chelsea was a year ago. For Chelsea, the confirmation that an accomplice is operating on Allison's orders triggers a catastrophic emotional collapse. It is a profound violation of her recovery. The realization that Allison still exerts absolute control over her life, even while locked inside a high-security facility, shatters Chelsea's fragile sense of autonomy. She is forced to confront the horrifying truth that physical distance and iron bars are not enough to sever the invisible, suffocating strings Allison has attached to her mind. Chelsea feels like a puppet dancing to a tune played by a madwoman in a cell. The extreme claustrophobia of knowing that anyone on the street, any passing stranger, could be the proxy stalker watching her every move, pushes Chelsea to the absolute brink of a psychological breakdown. The trauma is no longer a memory. It is a living, breathing entity occupying her present reality. Driven by a desperate need to sever this toxic influence, Smitty embarks on a highly dangerous game of cat and mouse with the unseen accomplice. Smitty's investigation shifts from merely identifying a caller to actively hunting a phantom operative. He begins to meticulously trace the digital footprints, analyzing cell tower pings, dissecting the precise timing of the calls, and digging into the visitor logs and communication records of Allison's facility. He is looking for the conduit, the corrupt guard, the compromised medical staff member, or the smuggled burner phone that allows Allison to transmit her orders to the outside world. Smitty knows that by poking around in Allison's dark network, he is painting a massive target on his own back, but his determination to protect Chelsea and unmask the proxy drives him relentlessly forward into the line of fire. As Smitty closes in, the narrative is perfectly positioned for a sudden, violent escalation in intensity. The silent phone calls and the heavy breathing are merely the psychological prelude. The accomplice, sensing the investigative pressure, or acting on escalated orders from an increasingly impatient Allison, will inevitably move from passive harassment to a direct, terrifying action. We can predict a scenario where the accomplice leaves a physical, encoded message at Chelsea's residence, an object, a photograph, or a specific symbol that only Chelsea and Allison would understand. This direct intrusion into her physical space will serve as undeniable proof of the accomplice's proximity and lethal intent, proving that the threat is capable of bypassing Kat's protection and breaching Chelsea's innermost sanctuary. This impending escalation sets the stage for a thrilling, breathless climax. Smitty's desperate attempt to approach the accomplice and cut off Allison's influence before the proxy can execute a final, devastating command will become a race against time. Smitty must decode the accomplice's identity and motives, whether they are a loyal fanatic or a desperate victim of blackmail, in order to neutralize the threat. The tension will reach a boiling point as Smitty navigates the treacherous underworld of Allison's contacts, knowing that one wrong move could trigger the accomplice to take lethal action against Chelsea to silence her forever. The suspense of this impending confrontation will keep viewers entirely on the edge of their seats, wondering who will strike first in this deadly proxy war. Ultimately, this harrowing ordeal will serve as the ultimate crucible for Chelsea's character. Pushed to the absolute limits of her sanity, surrounded by the ghosts of her past and the very real threats of her present, Chelsea will be forced to make a defining choice. Will she allow Allison's proxy to break her mind and drag her back into the abyss of victimhood? Or will she harness the profound, hard-won survival instincts that kept her alive a year ago? The emotional climax of this storyline will not just be about unmasking the accomplice, it will be about Chelsea reclaiming her narrative, standing up to the phantom control of her abuser, and proving that her spirit cannot be permanently broken by a monster behind bars or the puppets she controls. As we look toward the thrilling conclusion of this Beyond the Gates scenario, the questions hanging in the air are absolutely electrifying. Who is the face behind the heavy breathing? What dark leverage does Allison hold over this mysterious accomplice? And how far will Smitty have to go to sever the head of the snake and grant Chelsea the peace she so desperately deserves? The brilliant orchestration of this proxy stalker storyline proves that true terror doesn't always come from the monster you can see, but from the invisible reach of their malice. We invite you to share your deepest theories and predictions as we watch this masterful psychological thriller unfold, piece by terrifying piece.